again, it is good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever people are joining for. Pleasure to be here and thank you for making time for this session. I am Shivaani and I have my amazing co-facilitator Rashmi with me today. So we will be talking on the subject which is not much spoken about, but extremely important in the corporate world and the corporate ladder. We will be talking about the everything all about how leaders grow and how leaders work in their own positions. So while leadership is a beautiful thing, it is a great responsibility and a great role that everybody aspires for, but it comes with its own perks and challenges. And one of the things that we will be speaking today is about how to combat loneliness in leadership. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit quickly about me and Rashmi. We are the co-facilitators here. Both come with almost 2 decades of experience. Both are executive coaches and facilitators, and a lot of other things that we do in terms of people development and human skills development. So this is a quick background. Happy to connect with people offline or on LinkedIn, wherever they will wish to. Okay. Getting into the conversation, I will invite everybody, whoever is listening to us, to please keep your mobile phones on silent and bring yourself to the conversation. A conversation which is extremely important, yet less spoken about, to ask ourselves, how are we navigating and how are we feeling today? So the quick question here is, how are you all feeling today? If you had to pick up a weather to compare your mood from, how is it feels like? Is it bright and sunny? Is it gloomy, cloudy, or anything else?
I'm feeling bright and sunny, Shivaani.
Wonderful. Even I have a very bright and sunny day here. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. And anything anybody else want to say, please feel free to put it on the chat. So as the day continues and as we all are feeling bright, let's see how can we add more brightness to this particular subject today. Okay. And the first thing that comes here is, what do we expect from this conversation? Why did you even choose to come to this session? And what about this topic that resonates with you? Anybody has any insights who are in the audience, if we have? Yes, no?
One of the things I was discussing this with a group of people, saying that I'm going to talk about this topic. One of the things that everybody shared was it doesn't matter at what level you are. This creeps in the minute you become a leader or a manager because the dynamic changes. So
Absolutely.
something that people were able to relate when I shared about what I'm talking about today. So maybe some of us are here because of that.
Beautiful. Yeah, very well said, Rashmi. This is what happens. What is actually leadership? We all are leaders in our own capacity. But as we move up the ladders and as we take extra responsibility, the dynamics with our peers and with our co-workers change. And that is where we started feeling some shift and change in ourselves and how to manage that. Yeah. So let's take this ahead and talk about what we are covering today. We are covering up the what, the why, and the how of leadership and leadership loneliness. What it is all about, why do we feel that way, how is that transition happens, and how to actually combat it, how to navigate this entire thing.
Yeah.
Okay?
And we're also trying to emphasize on the self-awareness piece, a little bit more on the self-awareness piece. How can being aware of what you're feeling and how you're feeling is going to enable or help you in order to combat loneliness in leadership as we speak forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it is the key element. And as we will speak further, we will discover why it is so important. And let me put it out there, while we all feel that we know ourselves, if it was the case, probably we all would be thriving happily in our leadership roles. However, probably the reality is not as we feel or perceive in our mind. So let's see what's going on. This is where the data talks about more than what I was about to say. It very clearly says that what is the reality check of the studies in the leadership arena and how loneliness is playing a major role there. 50% of leaders identify loneliness as one of the biggest challenges today. 97 fields reported lonely. 63.5% of these leaders felt lonely sometimes. So we all have. It is a very human factor. It is a very human emotion. Nothing right or wrong about it. But if it happens not in a seemingly helpful way, then it becomes a problem. And that is exactly what we are trying to focus here. So what is actually loneliness? What is leadership loneliness and what does it actually entail? This is what it is called. It is the prolonged emotional and psychological isolation experienced by leaders due to their unique roles, responsibility, and perceived expectations. The words are very mindfully highlighted here. As I just said, we all feel lonely at some point. It is a human nature. Nothing right or wrong about it. But when it happens for a prolonged time, when it is happening continuously, when it is hindering our day-to-day activities or our roles and responsibility, or we are perceiving the expectations not in alignment, there is something which is not okay. And it is impacting us in a lot of ways, in our decision making, in our way of working, and how we are operating. So, what do you think? Is loneliness equal to being alone?
Um, I don't think so. What do you think?
No, not really. Being alone and being lonely are two different things. And sometimes people, misinterpret this, but that is where the reality check is required. A person can be alone and happy. A person can be happy in their own company, enjoying the solitude, and that is very different from feeling lonely, where you feel the void, where you feel something is missing, when you feel you're lost, you're not into a very happy state, you're not able to make your decisions very firmly and very nicely. So there is a difference. And that is where loneliness is basically the absence of meaningfulness and the connection despite being surrounded by people. How many times we have heard this in our lives, in our careers, being into a group of people, sitting into the boardroom meetings or into a gathering, but still feeling completely lost, alone, and probably a void that is making us not feel connected to people. That is where leadership loneliness comes. As we grow up the ladder, the complexities increase, and while we are very good technically in our roles, in our responsibilities, and what we are trying to do, somehow what we miss is the connection with the people, and that is what creates the lack of fulfillment that we call, and the lack of the energy that we require to perform. Yeah. So this is what loneliness is. Now, the thing is, do we have stories and observations of leaders who have faced loneliness? Anybody has, I'm happy to hear them, because that will bring the real essence of what are the practical challenges that we face in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, I can share one, Shivani. So I was actually an individual contributor when I started off my career in early part of my career. And when I became a team leader for the first time, I had to be leading the same people that I was working with, right? So that made it so uncomfortable for me because suddenly there was some kind of a distance. I can't say all the things to those people because I have more information than what they have, for good reasons, because they don't need to be burdened with that kind of information. It's part of my role. And even if I didn't want to, they would just, in a fun way say, "Arey, tell na, it's okay." I'm like, no, I can't, because there is a value to you being in that position, and there is a compliance that you have to maintain, there is confidentiality you have to take care of. So I felt really lonely in the beginning, at least while trying to adjust to the role.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Rashmi. This is the reality. Honestly, we are into the times wherein at least some amount of transition is happening, some amount of overview is happening. But there were times, as you said, when you and I got promoted into our first leader role, or when we have started managing teams. I have many anecdotes if I want to share. And we started feeling, whom should we go and talk about? How should we share? Because there is, as you said, there is compliance, there are formalities, there is confidentiality, everything cannot. And people find us changing. They feel that we are not the same person anymore. Although
Yeah.
that is not the reality, but that is what their perception comes, and the distance keep on increasing unknowingly. We don't even realize. Yeah. So great. I mean, as we see these stories folding up and understanding that it is really true, let's see in case if there are some implications of leadership loneliness, and what do you feel are or could be the implications. So if there are folks in the audience, there is a quick small question in a poll here. You can scan it from your mobile and answer it. It is just a one word. It will take a few seconds. And once you have done it, you don't have to do it another time in case if the another poll comes in. So feel free to take a minute and answer this one question, what are some of the implications you feel? And again, nothing right and wrong. Whatever comes to your mind, that could be the reason of and the implications that you feel of leadership loneliness. I hope the scanner is working and you are able to see the question.
Yes, so Shivani will move on. Some of the implications that I'm seeing of leadership loneliness is I see both positive and negative implication.
Mm-hmm.
One, times the negative is that because you're not able to share with everybody, because you're not able to express, openly, there is burnout because you are having to do a lot of things on your own. There is anxiety, there is stress because there is so much going on. Sometimes I also feel disengaged because I'm constantly going through the burnout day after day after day, right? And I haven't probably built enough connections to go out and share confidently. But on the flip side, I've also seen that sometimes in the busyness of everything, it's a blessing to be alone. You
Mm-hmm.
creative thinking, you can just be dependent on yourself, you can do deep reflection, and you probably are more creative than you are while you're so busy doing and doing and doing. So I think there are good and bad, positives and negatives of being lonely. But to your point, when you define prolonged emotional and physical exhaustion, right, psychological exhaustion, I'm thinking that is what um, damages the whole piece. So how can we balance?
Beautiful.
Probably is what I'm thinking.
No, beautiful. I think you have really nailed it, and it's such an important point. That is where the difference comes between are we lonely or are we alone? And that is the differentiation that we spoke in the previous slide. Loneliness is not equal to being alone. Being alone can be good. Being alone can be concentrative and you can be focused on your things and if you're enjoying what you're doing. Loneliness basically comes from the space when you feel not comfortable with your own company,
Yeah.
and that is the void, that is the space that basically makes us uncomfortable, and that implicates all our other works, our decisions, our interactions, and how are we perceiving things around us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we move ahead, here are some of the implications that we talked about. It can lead to health risks, it can lead to decision making challenges, as I just mentioned, and it can obviously lead to mental well being. When we are not happy, when we are not in the space of connectedness, we feel and that void keep increasing if we do not voice it out, if we do not share it with anybody, if we are not able to find what are the different ways that we can navigate and deal with it when we feel that, oh, there is absolutely nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is where basically the first insights comes in. So, for everything that we talked about, what is loneliness and what is leadership loneliness, the reality is it is widespread and it is often invisible. Invisible is the word here. It is not visible. It is not talked to. People are not able to say for themselves. Nobody else is able to recognize it on your face because we are very good at putting the mask and doing what we have to do. So, here is the first insight that comes in, that it is widespread and it is invisible based on everything that we have gathered for now.
So Shivani helped us understand what is leadership loneliness, what are the implications of leadership loneliness. Is alone different from being lonely? We covered so many aspects. Now, why does this happen? Right? There are several reasons why it could happen. You can move on, Shivani. So, what do you think? Can you think of something in your career, Shivani, that you have felt lonely as you grow, and what could have been the reason?
Absolutely. Why do leaders feel lonely as they grow? I mean, one of the aspects I think we beautifully covered, Rashmi, is how we transition from one role to another. But nobody actually talks about that transition is not only about the title and the role change. It is also emotional and psychological change when you have to deal with your own peers and co-workers differently, when interactions are more upward and not
Yeah,
sideways. And
yeah.
then you feel that, oh, I do not have anybody there, because when you talk upward, it's always with a hesitation of presenting yourself to the best rather than anything. So I think that is the space wherein you feel that void and it keeps on increasing over time when we do not address it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. From what I have seen, we can move on. So from what I've seen is leadership, often is seen as a privilege, right? When I was an IC, I always aspired to grow vertically, And because it was an aspiration, it was also some way telling me that if I don't grow vertically, I'm not successful.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
but what we don't realize is along with this comes the weight of the responsibility, the burden that comes with leadership. So imagine you are on top of the organization or a leader or a team. Every major decision could be around people, it could be around strategy, it could be around crisis. Ultimately, rests on your own shoulder, right? You seek inputs, no matter how much you consult the experts or get data, but at the end of the day, it's you who's making the decision, and because of which there is a huge burden on your shoulder, right? And one of the things that I have realized over a period of time is when I was in IC, it was very easy for me to, vent, express,
Yeah.
explain.
True.
And as soon as you become a leader, that group of people who you are able to vent to or talk to becomes thinner and thinner because your number of peers around you will get smaller. And
Yes.
then there is always this agenda that people have their own competitive spirit. Everybody wants to grow vertically. And since the positions are smaller and smaller, you probably end up competing with each other rather than collaborating with each other. So
Absolutely.
that burden of responsibility, the pressure to project confidence over a period of time to say, you know, if I am a leader, I have to have all the answers. If I am the
Mhm.
leader, no matter what, people will look for me for directions
True.
or for certainty or for strength. So I can't doubt myself at that point in time.
Yeah.
So my pressure to protect confidence becomes a huge thing. And that creates a gap between my team and my people or my peers because then I'm faking myself to be more confident while internally I am struggling, and that hesitation shows up as a gap, right? And I know you're going to cover this later on when we talk about strategies, but that piece of vulnerability where you're not able to express yourself and the lack of it actually adds on to the loneliness and strengthens your belief that you have to be alone and do everything alone. And I think thereby it diminishes the trust and all this confidentiality barriers come into place. And you end up feeling a lot more isolated than you even started. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is more like, you are wanting to say or share something, but you are not able to. It is
Yeah.
like there's a gap between the desire and the reality which is around you, and that keeps on seeping inside, and we are actually struggling with our own self because we do not see that there is a space to talk that out anywhere or do anything about it. What can we? Yeah.
Yeah, in preparation of this podcast, in preparation of this session, I was listening to a podcast where I heard that when you're complaining, you complain upwards.
Yes.
When you're sharing, you have to share, downwards, like, expressing. But because that is the kind of, responsibility you carry as soon as you become a leader. You cannot start complaining like you used to complain when you were an IC.
True, true, true. I think the culture is a part that plays a lot of role in how we do that communication, sideways, upwards, downwards, but it is a lot to do with our own human mindset because we don't feel comfortable. We want to show ourselves best to the seniors always.
Yeah, you're right. Because people who are confident, people who are showing results are promoted,
Yeah,
and want to
that
be
is the way
promoted.
it is. True,
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
So does
Okay.
it mean that what does psychology tell about it? Let's
Yeah,
hear what.
let's quickly hear about what does psychology says.
Loneliness happens want don't match the actual experience of relationships. Loneliness is a subjective and emotional response. We need to better understand its emotional impact. Our new report looks at how we can use it to express how loneliness can affect how people think and it can often feel like a downward spiral. But psychological techniques could reverse this and catalyze the upward spiral out of by building on this knowledge, improve support who are lonely, campaigning, one support can all make a difference. The first report of its kind in the UK. By understanding the psychology of, we have a chance of reducing the loneliness millions of us feel.
Yeah, so if we move on, I have a question. Does loneliness mean that it's a mental disease? Or is it a mental condition? What do you think?
That is a beautiful question. And, I often talk about this subject. Most of the people, and somehow because we are very widespread talking and social media has made people a lot aware in last few years, people have started thinking that loneliness is completely a mental disease, or somebody will feel that I'm mentally not okay if I go and share I'm feeling lonely.
Yeah.
And which probably I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're right. I feel it's just a warning. The minute you start feeling lonely, I feel it's like a symptom or a warning signal. That means you're psychologically and emotionally, responding to the lack of meaningful connection. That's when you start feeling that way. And I like what you said initially in the definition. If it gets prolonged, then probably it gets converted into issue that can cause mental illness, like anxiety, depression, and so on. But I believe that loneliness is not a mental health problem by itself,
Yeah.
but it is interlinked with each other, because the more and more poor mental health you have, you will withdraw socially from the outside, where you don't want to meet people, you don't want to express because of fear of being judged, fear of failure, and so many other things, which will eventually lead to loneliness. And because you're being alone all the time and you're suffering from loneliness, it further worsens your mental health, because there are no solutions, there are no answers, and then you're getting more and more anxiety, anxious, and then going back to depression. So it is a full loop, like a cycle, I guess. So that's what come to my mind, whenever I think about this in this aspect.
This is very well said. As you said, I think it is a complete cycle. It is a vicious cycle when it starts, and sometimes people do not know how to break this pattern because they feel that they are lonely, and that is the reason they are not connecting and they are not doing everything. However, it is also because they are feeling that way in their minds, that is where what is reflected in their activities and their expression with others.
Yeah,
So it comes vice versa, and the cycle keeps going on, vicious cycle, and they have no idea how to break it. So they start feeling something is not okay, but they are not able to put the finger to it, what it is, and what
yeah,
it is, why it is happening this way, why I'm suddenly feeling not very comfortable while the careers are very hunky dory and we are having colleagues and tea breaks and all. But suddenly there is a lot of silence, and I feel that I have only work but nothing else, and I do not know how to navigate this. So yeah.
right. Yeah, so I think you touched upon a very interesting point, which is, the title of this topic called awareness, right? If you're not aware of our own emotions or our own thoughts and behaviors, and we also probably are not aware on how it is impacting our relationship with others, whether it
Yeah.
is your giver, whether it is your direct reports, whether it is your manager, right? And if you are holding a leadership position, and as individuals and leaders, you lack this self-awareness, then I'm sure you're often struggling with social interactions, which means that there is miscommunication, you are misinterpreted, you probably are feeling isolated or being isolated, and then you end up feeling lonely. So, let's move on and see, how does lack of self-awareness, really affect loneliness?
Sure, sure. And that is where, how do you know basically, that if you are feeling lonely? How should you even put the finger, as I said, something is not okay inside you. You were very happy when you got the promotion. You were very happy when you got that title. You know now you will be managing bigger projects and bigger teams. You have interactions with the seniors. You're sitting in important meetings. And all of that looks very good. Family are more happy with you. People congratulate you, but suddenly, as you start getting into the spiral of that working, you somehow miss yourself completely and the connections that you require. How do you even know that it is loneliness and it is not? People often call it, oh, I'm very overburdened, or it is stress, or it is the environment, or it is my boss, or so many other reasons. But what actually it is? And here are some beautiful questions, and I will invite anybody and everybody who is here to kind of go through these particular questions and answer for yourself.
Yeah, so let me read out those questions for you guys. So, do you feel there is no one to share your challenges or honest thoughts without fear of judgment? It's a either yes or a no question. You can say sometimes, but what is your bias towards? How often do you feel, right? So, do you feel disconnected or misunderstood even when you are surrounded by people? Do you believe you must always have the answers and constantly mask vulnerability? I love this point. I think all of us do this in order to look confident, in order to look great, in order to look credible and highly effective leaders. We don't show our real self. We mask our hesitations, we mask our struggles. And because we don't show the vulnerability when we fail, to even just say, I don't know, I think
Yeah.
at times learn it, and then it becomes a culture of non-open behavior or not so. We used to call it speak-up culture. We don't have a speak-up culture. So, do you believe that way? That you must always have the answers and constantly ask questions? Do you take on too much because you feel others won't fully understand or deliver? I used to do that when I was initially a new team leader. I used to ask my team member to put a PPT together, and when she sends the PPT back to me, I would go correct it back again because it was too much to go back and tell her how to do it. Rather, I do it myself.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And do you feel drained or detached from your role and its purpose?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you have answered at least three of these as yes, then I'm sure you may be feeling more, but you may not be aware of it. So it's a great reflection for you to think about before we jump into the next piece. Okay, let's move on, Shivan.
Okay.
Okay, so how does lack of self-awareness contribute to loneliness?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very pertinent and important question to reflect upon. And I should invite everybody to take a moment to really think, what is the connection between self awareness and loneliness? Do we even feel that we do not know ourselves? Or to that extent that it can impact and contribute to loneliness? And it can further, is its spiral. The beginning is the loneliness, and but after that, there are so many implications that we saw since we started this conversation, how all and where all it can impact.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are some of the things that I have noticed. You can move on to the next slide.
Hmm.
So, why this happens is one, I think our ability to identify social cues
Yeah.
is very, very important. You may have a team member where you have shared the feedback and is not feeling good about it, but if you're not able to sense that in the way they respond or in the way they emote, or are you just focused on giving the feedback and walking away, you may be missing out on building that connection and probably are going to end up being lonely. Social cues, when I mean social cues, I'm talking about the tone of the voice, your body language, your subtle shifts in conversation. As a leader, you need to be aware of this. And sometimes what also happens is, when you have a lot of negative self-talk or low esteem, one of the examples that I always give is this: when I train and I have 10 people in the session, out of which nine of them give me raving feedback, 10 out of 10. But there's one person who rated me a 7 or a 8. I end up questioning myself and being too critical on myself and get into this mode of overthinking and negative self-talk. What that does is, if it happens multiple times, it becomes, it affects my esteem, right? I start feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Or maybe I will take that one feedback as rejection. Or maybe it will also show up in the relationship, in other relationships that I have, right? And I might end up projecting my fears onto someone else because I am feeling it internally.
Yeah.
So, right, all of these, are some of the symptoms that are contributing to loneliness. And if I'm not aware of it, it's going to affect me even more. The next piece is, most of us in a culture like India are asked to focus on others' needs rather than our own needs. And we are probably taught, to not express our, emotions or pains or struggles, but, to learn to sacrifice them because somebody else will feel bad or it's going to impact someone else, right? So this need to communicate, saying that I need help, I need support, I need the connection or understanding is lacking in some of us, which may eventually, when we are not aware about it, it can lead to loneliness as well, because we don't have anybody to talk to.
True.
Sometimes we also misinterpret, social situations, right? Somebody may be doing something and we will misunderstand, saying that, let's say somebody just didn't listen to what I was saying in a class. I may perceive that is this person is being rude. Maybe that person is distracted for something else. Maybe the person is not, keeping well. It could be anything. But we may end up in misinterpreting social situation, and we create our own feelings of isolation because these situations reinforce that you're alone, or you are ending up being lonely, right? And finally, your ability to adapt to new behaviors based on the need of social, connections. So it's all about flexibility, right? If you are not able to adjust to someone else's need and change your behavior and be there for your teams, your peers as a leader, you may, not be aware of that and end up again being lonely because you're going to miss out on those crucial connections that you really need to thrive as a leader.
True, true. I think these are very, very powerful points, Rashmi, because I realized as you were speaking and as I was reflecting, self-awareness and most of the people in general never talk about these particular situations, these particular incidences. They do not know how my response is impacting somebody else or how I am perceiving others because of my inner space, my inner world. How
Yeah,
do I feel and how do I misinterpret their behavior, or I feel and I feel myself protected. So when people are not able to adapt, basically they're scared of change or they're scared to adjust because they have this protective shield in front of them and they think that I'm good the way I am, otherwise somebody might misuse me, somebody might not be very fair to me, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think these are very powerful points. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it brings us to the insight too, right? Lack of self-awareness can amplify loneliness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I feel this is the core. This is the core. While we talk a lot and we might have all these different ways of means of doing it, but you can only get up and do anything for yourself when you can catch yourself that there
Yeah,
is something which is not okay, and this not okay, I can give it a name, I can give it a shape, I can know what it is and where it is coming from. And it might not be absolutely the environment around me, sometimes it can be deep rooted or other conditions, but to be able to identify that is everything coming under the umbrella of self awareness. And that is the reason it is a journey, when you continuously keep doing it and seeing a progress in connecting with yourself as much as you are connected with the external world.
yeah, it's beautiful. One of my favorite quotes is like this: awareness precedes choice, choice precedes change. Only when you become aware of the choices you have or the challenges you have, you may think about going this way or that way, right? You will have a choice. Only when you pick up a different choice from what you have been doing so far, you will be able to see the change. So,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful. I
I
think
think,
that is very beautifully you have summarized both the things in terms of where we started, what it is, where it is coming from, and how it is the self-awareness piece is impacting to amplify it, and that too unknowingly. Most of the time we are not even aware because we think as per the checklist we are doing everything right. Whether it is timely doing, timely sleeping, timely working, timely delivering our work, whatever. But we are not understanding our internal clock, what is happening within us.
yeah, awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's move ahead from here and now see, by though we know what it is and why it is happening, where it is coming from, at least to some extent, obviously it is a deeper subject and a lot more can be explored. What can we do about it? How can we actually navigate these situations wherein we are managing important roles, matrix, timelines, important goals, complex situations, business decisions, and in between of all that chaos, there is this inner chaos which is going on, which is actually not helping, not supporting in any way, but adding more stress to the outer situations, right?
Yeah.
So that somehow this is how it feels. We find ourselves in a split situation, into divided into different roles and different masks, as we said earlier also. We feel like having these identities and roles as a leader in the organization, as a parent, as a sibling, or as a partner, as a parent, all these different things are going on. And what we are inside us, there is a empty void. While everything is happening outside, there is something that we are not finding. So here is an opportunity to take a moment and connect with yourself and feel what is something that I am missing and how can I become from that split person of divided into different things to the wholesome me? How can I be connected to myself also while I'm trying to connect with everything else? Yeah. And then let's try and see what are the different ways that we can do it. There are different strategies, and it does depend on every individual, how they feel it, how they process the information, and how they respond to the external situations. But here are some key strategies, and we will talk of the three main today. The first one, as we talked already, is the self-awareness and reflection piece, and why it is important, what to do and why it works, So what is self-reflection? And I think this is a very important point I will bring here. As coaches, we all coach, and I coach so many senior leaders. And honestly, sometimes the basic struggle for them is to reflect. When we are asking these questions in between, probably people do have thoughts and feelings to talk around it, but they are not able to articulate and bring it forward. Because reflection is not something which is taught to us. It is not something that nobody talks about. It is more about the result. It is more about the end goal. Nobody talks of the process to lead there. And that is where setting aside that time of self-reflection to just give 10 minutes. I mean, it's one of my favorite activity all my coaches do. Even if it is just 10 minutes a day and you can think for yourself, what was the happy moment in the day and what was something that really made me not so comfortable today? That self-reflection, that thought that connect with yourself, whether it is early morning, you're having your cup of tea or coffee, or whether going before the bed, just giving that 10 minutes to yourself. And that can make so much difference because it really helps you to recognize what it is which is bothering me inside. What is that unsaid feeling which is interrupting my work, my progress, and I want to do so much, but I'm not able to do. People call it different names. Some call it procrastination. Some call it I'm scared. Some says that I'm not sure what will happen, the fear of uncertainty. But that loneliness arises and it empowers, and you take the proactive step if you're aware of it. What can I do? Yeah. So this is the first beautiful. Any thoughts on this from you, Rashmi?
You're perfectly, you articulated very well. But one of the things that when I ask my coaches to do self-reflection or become aware of, their own presence and their own power, one of the common reasons that comes out is we are busy. We don't
Yeah.
have the time, right? Who's going to do all of this? There is so much to do, and I can't take away half an hour for you to do that. But what they don't understand is it does not need the half an hour.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like you mentioned, it could be just a simple activity before you sleep. And, just maybe write a gratitude journal. Talk
Yeah.
about things that you're grateful for. Maybe talk about, like you mentioned, what is one of the biggest highlights of today? Where
Yeah.
did I start it? Right? Just taking that time off brings out the focus on the most important things maybe you need to work on rather than just going through the day like a routine over and over again without much concentration.
Absolutely. 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 We are so mechanic in our lives otherwise that we forget eat, sleep, repeat mode. And it's a fun fact. I reminded of some conversation wherein somebody said, while you are normally having your morning time and you're brushing your teeth, can you for a second just connect with yourself and ask, hey, how are you today? Rather than everything else that is running in your mind, what next I have to do? So those small moments of connecting with self, I think, makes a lot of difference.
Which is
Okay.
why I like the breathing exercises, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
when you just focus on your breath, you,
Absolutely.
I practice something called box breathing, where you
Hmm.
inhale, you hold for 5 seconds, and then you exhale for 5 seconds, again hold for 5 seconds. So it's like a box. And when you
Yes.
do that, you become aware of how cold the breath is or how hot the breath is when it comes out. That itself teaches awareness. And that's how I started. I think once you get to know how your body is responding, how your, pace of your breath increases, decreases, you will really understand yourself a lot more. If you just do.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think you touched a very, very crucial point. One of the things, and I will leave this for the audience here, we think that all of that we are talking is lot to do with the mind, but honestly not. It is to do with your entire body. Your
Yeah.
body speaks with you and it gives you signs and signals, If you listen, if you give those few moments to yourself, it tells that, okay, there is something which is not okay, and it helps you navigate. Whether it is loneliness, whether it is hurt, whether it is something unresolved, whether it is maybe an interaction or a nature of somebody else in my work which is bothering me. But it is not the nature of the other person alone. It is my response to that nature which is also bothering. How am I responding to those situations? So situations might not always change. You can't change bosses and companies and norms always, but you can always change how you perceive, how you process, and how you respond to those situations.
Yeah, awesome. So let's
Wonderful.
we'll jump into one of the tools that, we've used, that we
Yeah,
can use. It's called Ladder of Inference. It's one of my favorite tools. This was introduced by Chris Agris. And, you can consider this as a tool that will help leaders recognize how one's unconscious assumptions and beliefs contribute to leadership loneliness, and how can we move to greater awareness, right?
sure.
So if you look at it, there are really 7 steps, right? And it starts from the bottom. Every situation that you're part of, even if you take the place that I'm sitting right now, on the left side there are a huge number of books. On the right side there is a water bottle, right? Anybody who walks into my room will see both, but depending on what they pick, that's the available data. There are books, and then there is water. There are multiple water bottles. Now, if people who see the books are choosing to see the books, which is a selected data, and they may interpret saying that, okay, she reads a lot of books,
Yeah.
and then they end up assuming, oh, she reads so much, which means she must be knowledgeable, and then
Hmm.
conclude saying that, oh, she's a voracious reader. I may have just kept the books like that. Who knows whether I read it or not? But I start concluding that, I'm a voracious reader. And then every time they come to my room, or meet me, I've already built a belief system that she's a voracious reader, and hence she knows so many things, right? She's an expert. And next time I have a problem, they will reach out to me. They have a problem, they will reach out to me. See, this is how it happens. While think of another scenario where people did not see the books, but they saw the water bottles on the right? And they probably start thinking, okay, she drinks so much water, she must be dehydrated.
Yeah.
And then they assume saying that next time when we meet her, maybe we'll bring a water bottle along with us. So they conclude, and they end up believing that either she's dehydrated, always thirsty. So the next time when they come to see me, or when I'm going to do a session, maybe they'll keep a lot of water bottles at my desk before we start, right? This is how powerful this tool is, which helps us realize that though there is data, we rely on our emotions much more as we move up the.
Beautiful, beautiful. It seems that we have a lot which is going inside us, but we do not look for the validation, or we do not look for evidence. We just go with those assumptions and conclusions and beliefs, and we
Yeah.
create a picture of our own. Is that right to say?
Yes, absolutely. So there's an example in the next slide. Let's talk about it a little,
Yeah.
just to strengthen your understanding. Imagine you're a leader, and you were not invited for an informal team gathering. Your team has met together, and they're having dinner. Now, what data will you choose that they didn't invite you? And in that, you start saying that they did not include me in that meeting. So one of the interpretation could be that maybe they don't see me part of the team. And then you will start assuming that, oh, they don't want to connect with me, because of whatever reasons. Now, because they don't want to connect with me, I'll conclude that because they don't want to be part of, they didn't want me to be part of their conversation. So I think I should distance myself. Next time there is a team meeting happening, even if they invite, I won't, right? So then I start believing the fact that being a leader means being alone. And then the more and more this happens, I withdraw even more, and I keep reinforcing this. So just
Beautiful.
imagine if you could just focus on what was happening and what did I notice. Probably the interpretations, the assumptions, the conclusion, the beliefs, actions can be totally different. right? So this is something that I practice really, and whenever there is a conflict situation, whenever I'm stuck with something, and I don't feel comfortable in the end the way I responded to something, I use this letter of reference, and I go backwards and I question myself, at what stage did it
Hmm.
shift for me, right?
Absolutely
Uh,
beautiful.
was my assumption, valid? Um, why did I conclude the way I concluded? Or what was my belief system based on? Can there be alternative assumptions with alternate conclusions, and then maybe my belief system will change and probably my behavior or action will change?
Yeah.
So, have you used this, Shivani?
Yes, yes, I have. And I think this is so beautiful. Basically, it's giving me the sense, instead of being curious and asking questions and having clarifications, how we create our own mental stories and we live with them
Yeah.
and we block our own path, and then we feel that it is the environment and we go into the victim mode sometimes, that it is all because of others this is happening, or I'm not getting what I want and I'm not happy. So, while we feel that everything is happening around, basically, majorly everything is happening within us and we don't even realize. And, and I loved when you said about catching yourself at the right stage. Knowing and understanding the data is okay, but what is am I selecting? How am I interpreting? How am I processing it? And am I concluding my assumptions so firmly that they become my beliefs, and then I don't want to change, and then I want to keep that hold on it? I think that is what is the place wherein rather be curious, ask questions, clarify things, try to learn more about somebody else rather than just making a belief system for them. And that is all is coming. So I think this is a very, very powerful tool.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on. There's another example we can probably, share, and then we'll go ahead. Okay,
Sure.
so here's another example where a leader observes the team does not openly challenge their ideas, then they start assuming it's because the team does not respect them. And then
Mm-hmm.
concluding that they are alone in decision making, and next time they believe that they can't rely on the team, and they'll stop completely avoiding, seeking input or increasing, which will increase isolation eventually. Right? So there are many such situations, right? It could be in decision making, it could be in building connections. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, we are often misinterpreting social situations. We are often, not able to see the verbal cues or the social cues that are existing in our environment. And like you said, victimizing ourselves and isolating ourselves more and more, leading to leadership loneliness.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think this is such a live example because I've seen so many people going through these situations, kind of questioning their own caliber and confidence sometimes because they feel that they are not able to do it. And then they create that feeling of not able to so big that they overpower their own abilities and their own capabilities, what they can do instead, you know. So it overshadows, and that is where I think this is a powerful tool for them. And everything that we talked about, having that mindfulness, having that reflection, catching yourself at the right time, right stage, and looking out, what are the strategies, how can my self reflection help me, basically. So this is extremely important as leaders. I think people misinterpret that leadership is all about the titles and the roles and the complex decision making, but it is a lot to do with self management also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Self management with respect to emotions,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
cognition, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Great. So, as we move ahead, in the piece of how I think another important aspect of the strategy in terms of how can we navigate loneliness and how can we navigate this mental, turmoil that we are going through is creating support networks. It is very, very important to find the right people and have those connections. Does not matter it is in the corporate world, it is outside, it is a peer group, it is a mentor group, having the right coach. But it is extremely important that we have a safe space like this where we can talk about it and we can challenge, what is not going okay or what is going okay. And that is where a lot of groups, in fact, now the culture has changed, the communities are coming together, people are opening up a little bit more, thanks to blessing in disguise of what has happened in last few years. People have started being a little more aware, but I still see there is a huge gap and a lot more to be done. And cultivating those support networks is important. A strong support network can provide that safe space to share, to struggle, to seek advice, to feel that, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. I think that is the most important thing to kind of say to yourself. You're not the only one. Every person going through that stages has gone through. Even the biggest of the CEOs at some point, and we both coach senior leadership, so be very well aware. As much they are bold and confident and having those big titles, but at the end they're humans and they do have their own moments of doubts and fears and uncertainties that they navigate. One of the things that I feel people find challenge is finding that right people and how to create that support system, how to approach, how to even initiate the conversation. And I know that is slightly a different subject, but that is something that people need to reflect upon. The more you feel comfortable and confident and aware of yourself, that is where self-awareness we are talking, the more easy it gets to seek out and to lean to others. Even if the response is coming or not coming, you don't stop trying and finding the right tribe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful, right? Some of us as leaders hesitate to build those peer connections because of a sense of competition,
Mm-hmm.
because you always feel that he's out to get me or she's out to get me, and there is just a very little space for all of us to grow. So let me grow instead of this person. We probably end up putting each other down. Like you also mentioned earlier, culture plays a huge role. What are we, rewarding and recognizing? What kind of behaviors are we rewarding and recognizing in our organization? That plays a huge role. But having said that, there are so many other support groups outside of the organization.
Yeah, yeah.
Who may be of help. Like, recently attended a panel discussion that was organized by Shinomics, where,
Hmm.
women leaders across multiple organizations were invited, and we were talking about equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was a great conversation for 2 hours. We didn't even realize how the time went. And we got answers for so many questions that each of them had, but we
Hmm.
were all disconnected from their context, right? So I may not be able to impact them negatively in any way because they are in their own context. I'm speaking of my own context, but we have the same problems. So it's important for us as leaders to find those groups or support networks where you can feel safe to share your struggles, seek advice, and feel less isolated when you're making these decisions or working on different initiatives. I think that is how you will move away from being lonely to be building more collaboration and at least feeling like you are building meaningful connections through various other forums, not necessarily with your teams or peers or leaders.
True, true. Very, very beautifully said, Rashmi. And I think that taking that initial step is so important. And connecting back to something that you said some time back, people usually say that they don't have time. But
Yeah,
in my experience, when you make something a priority, you automatically make time for it.
yeah,
So the bigger question comes is, are you a priority for yourself?
yeah,
While you
100%.
are a priority for all the other identities and roles that you are playing as a leader, as a parent, as a responsible person for a big group of people who are working for you, and all the other roles. But in that complete complex thing, and while you are taking all those complex decisions, and you are responsible for others' careers and others' life in a way, in that all complexity, where are you? And are you making that priority for yourself that while I'm doing everything in the pie, I can have a small piece and I take that initial step of one conversation, one attending such a space where probably we are talking today, or finding that one coach or a one person, and to start opening up to talk about these challenges. And as you rightly said, there are so many places and communities available today. Only if leaders are not hesitant of, as you said, competition, and to be vulnerable and a little bit open, because I think still it seems to be a taboo to go and say, oh, I'm such an experienced senior person, how can I go and talk about something which is not comfortable to me?
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Well,
Let's move
wonderful.
on.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, these are the beautiful ones. And as we move ahead, we have, some of the theories which basically prove and second everything that we have been talking for, more than an hour now. Theories itself shows, and it is not new. One of the data points with all these findings and research also tells us that this is not new. It is only, in fact, we are getting more isolated as we are growing technologically in advancement, rather than the olden tribes that were probably more community driven. So humans have an innate need to belong, and I think that is a very, very common thing. Sense of belongingness is the core of being a human, and it is extremely important that we are catering to that. Otherwise, loneliness arises when there is a gap between, the desire and the actual social relationships. And this is what we have seen in all our slides and what we have been talking since starting. When you do not feel that connect, when you do not feel that space, you create that void, and that void basically gets filled with non-supportive energies and all those negative thoughts and all that stress that you build in yourself, which is not supporting to progress, but stopping and becoming your own hindrance in your own path. So ultimately, when we are trying and continuously doing it, we consider and we create loneliness as a survival mechanism. We think that, okay, this is the only way to survive and to live. I talked earlier, we create the shield in front of us because it feels safe now. We are in a comfort zone. Eat, sleep, repeat, do the job that is told, get the numbers, what is required, complete the checklist, and that is it. However, inside we are burning and we don't realize.
Yeah.
So I think those are the things, and it is so well connected with everything, and repetitively, and coming back to where we started. That is when it happens prolonged, and when we continuously feel but do not address, it actually will eventually lead to mental sickness, and will impact the entire well-being.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience?
Any questions, any thoughts? We are more than happy to hear. Anything from the audience? Anybody who's listening want to speak? Want to write in chat something? Yes, no?
I see a lot of, earlier comments, I think, which we missed. I'll just read it out for us.
Yeah.
Corporate world can be a lonely place today. The survival of the fittest culture or the competition at workplace can be attributed to this. Trust issues are common. Also, the social structures that traditionally existed used to provide the necessary cushion to cope with workplace pressure. Now we are noticing a paradigm shift which adds to negative loneliness related implications. Right? And so, they mentioned that it's a very interesting question related to loneliness at workplace. What is the source of this tool?
What is the source of?
The tool with the questions. So,
the questions. Okay, we can. I mean, yeah. So, by the way, this entire presentation or whatever information that we are sharing, we are happy to share. Connect with us, or at the end, we will ask for your LinkedIn IDs and you can drop it, and we will be happy to send you source of the tool. But I think some of the insights what everybody has said, and because I was not on it, I think it is very interesting how people are seeing it, and what are the different thoughts which are coming up, because this is the reality. Yes, the time and the culture all corporate world has made us mold into the kind of a racing mechanism of finding it, but it is important that we keep going and looking for ourselves in the mix. Yeah. Okay. So wonderful comments there. And as we move ahead, I think we will quickly see the last piece of strategy, which is practice vulnerability and authenticity. Some aspect that we did covered in everything that we said. It is important to be open about challenges with, trusted colleagues in your team, or finding the right support groups, as we just spoke about. And why it works is basically vulnerability, or showing that there is another side of you, is a very, very basic human need for deeper connections. To encourage others, to make people feel safe around you, in fact, to innovate and to be creative. It is extremely important. You cannot come up with new ideas and new solutions if you do not feel comfortable taking the risk of presenting them. So practicing those aspects and starting small bit and creating those trusted environment is extremely important for not only combating and navigating loneliness, but to thrive and use that inquisitiveness and curiosity to build better things for ourselves and for the organizations that we work for. Yeah. Awesome. Any thoughts, any questions here? Yes, no?
Let's move on, Shivaani. I don't see
Okay.
any.
So fine. As we move on, let's quickly see this and understand a little bit about how and what practical, vulnerability and authenticity is talked about. One of, I think, both of us famous.
I think the biggest myth about vulnerability is I were raised to believe that it was modeled. I think we see that a lot. That to be
Shivaani, there is voice is breaking. So it's not very clear. You want to start it again?
Should not. Okay. Now?
So I think the biggest myth about
Let it be.
Sorry.
about vulnerability is that it's weakness. People were raised that it was modeled. I think certainly in our culture, we see that a lot. That to be vulnerable, to be open, to be exposed, is to be weak. And the truth in my research is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, I would argue the greatest measure of courage. When we went out and asked people, what is vulnerability? Things like vulnerability is the first date. Vulnerability is starting my own company. Vulnerability is taking responsibility for something that went wrong at work. Vulnerability is sitting with my wife who has stage 3 breast cancer and making plans for our young kids. Vulnerability is taking my business public. The definition I use in my work is simply uncertainty, risk, and emotion. Vulnerability is about the willingness to show and to be seen even when there are no guarantees. And it's interesting to me. I mean, one of the things I thought was a talk, it's probably a couple of years now, being translated, people doing American Sign Language, and they came up before the talk started, they said, are you going to use a lot in your talk that we should, it might be different. I said, well, I use the word vulnerability a lot. There were two of them, they kind of looked at each other and they said, oh, we do for vulnerability. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, it means we can. I'm like, wow, that's not how I talk about vulnerability. And she said, well, one other sign for vulnerability. I said, what is it? And she said, and I said, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so to me, is our most accurate measure of courage. I mean, it's pretty powerful when I have 12 years that I cannot find a single story of courage that was not completely underpinned by vulnerability. I think the problem arises that there are paradoxes with vulnerability, and one of them is that vulnerability is courage in you, but weakness in me. When I meet you, it's the first thing I look at, but it's the last thing I want to show you in me. And ourselves out there, knowing that if we do that, we're going to fail. I just don't think it gets more.
Yeah, so I love this video, Shivan. One of the things that I really like about this video is when she mentions that, the vulnerability is weakness in me, but courage for someone else, right?
Absolutely.
Calling out my flaws, my failures, and I'm showing up despite me not feeling comfortable with it and showing the courage to be there so that somebody else gets inspired, so that somebody is able to take action, so that somebody benefits from it. It is definitely, vulnerability is not definitely oversharing and just going on and on about, all the problems that you have and things like that. You have to choose when you are, as a leader, you are able to balance being vulnerable and being, it's supporting or showing the courage in a way that is actually helping someone, not because, you just have to show that you are vulnerable, just show that you're weak. So how is it benefiting someone, or how is it impacting someone? I think that matters more to me in this video.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you have said it beautifully. This is such an important piece. It is slightly opening up and coming in organizations, but I still see a lot less than it should be. And one of the things that she also beautifully talks about, knowing that there are no guarantees. We do not know what the response will be, and that is where I always say, when you are trying to connect going and finding your tribe or those support groups or those allies in the company or outside, they're the only ways to do is to try it out, because there is no formula to it. You cannot know anybody completely or say that, okay, there is this, you can have some broader aspects that, okay, this is what I like or I'm looking for, or there are certain things that align with me, but you can only know somebody's value systems, or you can somebody's, whether they are connecting, and is it a safe space for you when you try it out. And that try itself is a step of courage. It does have certain level of risk, and that is vulnerable. It is not easy to do it, especially as you grow above the ladders and you keep growing, your work keep increasing, your pressures are so high, your responsibilities and decision making is so complex. And in the midst of all of that, and I think as coaches we experience this a lot, while people are so successful, they still need that 45 minutes, 30 minutes of conversation that makes a difference for them in every session, because of that space that is created. And not necessarily with a coach itself, but with anybody, but it is important to find that space for yourself. So I think, as you said, it is the act of courage. And I think this is a beautiful segue to also ask the most important question, which I say, and that is where the third reflection comes in: building self-awareness and support systems mitigate loneliness. There is no doubt about it. Research shows it, reality shows it, and lived experiences shows this. All aspects, that more you are able to know yourself, more you can understand your own patterns, your mental framework, your inner world, and how it processes the outer world, how it responds to the outer world. And if you can have that support system that can help you to connect in those levels as much as you are connected with all the external world in other levels, it will not only help mitigate loneliness, but it will basically help you thrive more with the same energy that you are holding, but utilizing it in a positive way. Yeah. So this is where the third and most important aspects insight of the entire self-awareness and how can it help combat loneliness comes in. We have talked about all three, and I think this is a beautiful segue to go into asking one of the most important questions: how much is too much? Where do we draw the line while creating that right balance? I think Brené also beautifully talked about, and you also said, it is not about, be it be any matrix, the matrix of revenue, the matrix of sales, the matrix of high productivity, the matrix of better culture and connection in organization. Every matrix, apart from the work that we do in the hand and the KRAs and KPIs, requires a certain amount of courage and connection and confidence. And that is basically the place where you need to find your right balance.
Yeah.
It-
Yeah,
yeah,
I just want to add that leaning towards anything too much is
yeah.
ending to end up dangerous for you, right?
Absolutely. So, as we say, access of everything is not, anything is not good. And I use this beautiful word. I think the skill of discernment is so beautiful and important in today's world, to
Yeah,
know and the right way of judging something, such a situation, and to know when to step back and when to lean in, how much to share, when to share. Vulnerability does not mean, and there are so many people I know and colleagues, and thanks to being into HR as a role, hundreds of stories wherein people would have literally cried in offices, or going to the washroom breaks and things, but they're not able to speak about it. But at the same time, we do not mean, you can be most vulnerable, but without showing completely emotional breakdown, still having your ground and having your firmness, and doing it in a way that supports to navigate and that supports others to feel safe around you, because you're not completely gone and you're not completely lost yourself,
yeah,
in a way. So yeah.
yeah. That's wonderful. What brings to my mind is eventually the intent. Why
Yes.
are you trying to be vulnerable? Is it because you want to help someone, or again, do you want to make someone feel motivated to work, or is it to uplift someone? So that, like, if you want to bring innovation in the organization, the intent, you're going to show failure as a learning, and
Yeah.
you're going to share it through your own story, not to someone else's story. That's where you're showing up courage to say that I didn't know, I failed, I cooked up, so that you build a culture of innovation in the organization. So again,
Beautiful.
back, balance comes with the intent. What is your intention of being this way or that way? And how can you make it conscious and be aware situationally about the context and about your own self by being self-aware.
Beautiful, beautiful. You have used some very, very useful words. Situation, context setting, and knowing when and for what intent are you doing. I think these are the three key pieces coming here. And it is so important for one to know it is not about being fake, or it is not about being vulnerable to take advantage, or to, just create that sorry situation to gain advantage of something. Because trust me, people think that it works, but it does not work, especially now. People can read what is inside you. People can read your energy as much as your words and your actions. So the authenticity is extremely important, and that is where the right balance come. And it is very individual. Everybody has to find what is my right balance. How much am I comfortable, and what is something that I can hold for myself? And that is where the combination of self-awareness, the right balance, and the right action comes together.
Awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I think this is how the journey has been, and I hope this was useful and it was, for the audience in the subject that we have been talking. We have covered a lot in 1.5 hours that we have been speaking. What is leadership loneliness? What are the implications? Why do leaders feel lonely? What is the psychology? How self-awareness and lack of it actually contributes so much unknowingly, and what are the key strategies to overcome? There are many other strategies, but we picked the key ones that we can accommodate in this time, and we will be happy to share more, if people connect with us on LinkedIn, as we said. But yeah, this is what it is. And I think if one thing I have to say to everybody to take away from this conversation, and if there is something for you to see, is understand this entire journey of the what, the why, the how that we covered. How much is the loneliness widespread but not talked about, why it is happening, and how building self-awareness can help us mitigate. And for you to go back and take the action, where will you draw the line to create the right balance, to convert your loneliness into liveliness, to use that energy to uplift you, to do more, to create the right support systems so that you are thriving in what you are doing, but you are not burning inside with the complexities of loneliness and with the stress of and the void that I am alone and there is nobody to talk to. And that is I think the call for action for our audience is for them to go and reflect and find their own balance.
Awesome. So there's another perspective in the chat. The gut-brain connection plays a crucial role in emotional regulation and cognitive function.
Beautiful.
A healthy gut microbiome supported by a fiber-rich diet and fermented food, stress response and mental clarity. So it's very important for leaders to do mindful eating. It's not just about nutrition; it's a tool for better decision making and emotional resilience. Thanks, Vidima. So this is a lot of information for you guys, and I'm sure that you would have at least picked one or two key takeaways that you can go back and apply for yourselves.